Hello, this is a short recording on the concept of a main term in diagnosis coding. Um, so, when we are looking at medical record documentation in a medical record or in a chart, we're going to see all sorts of different diagnoses, and I have here on the screen, which you should be able to see, just a handful of different diagnoses like breast mass or primary hydronephrosis, deviated nasal septum, inguinal adenopathy. Okay, so those are a few there at the top. And when we look at the documentation in the chart, we then have to look at the diagnosis, the terminology, identify what the main term is, and then go to the alphabetic index in the diagnosis book. And what we mean by main term is what is the main condition or problem, not the adjective or the descriptor, but what is the main problem. If we look at breast mass, it's mass, and then breast is the adjective describing where that mass is. The mass is the main problem. Primary hydronephrosis, the main term there is hydronephrosis. So with those two, we would go in the index and look up mass alphabetically, and then we would look up hydronephrosis alphabetically to code primary hydronephrosis. Once we get to those main terms like mass or hydronephrosis, I'm actually working with two examples here at the same time, but if we went to mass, we would then look underneath for the adjective or adjectives that we have. Now, in this case, it would be a body part, breast. We would look for that as a subterm and indentation after the main term mass. If we look at the next example, hydronephrosis, we would look at or for the main term, or the subterm rather, primary, and that would be indented under hydronephrosis. If we look at the next example, deviated nasal septum. So what's our main term here? What's the main problem? And I'm going to tell you now, almost always a main term is not a body part. So in the example breast mass, breast would not be the main term. That's the descriptor. If we go down to deviated nasal septum again, septum would not be a main term because that is a body part. Nasal describes the body part. What's the main problem? The deviation or deviated. So if we go to look for deviated, we aren't going to see that, but we'll see deviation, and that's really what the problem is. And then we're going to look for either nasal or septum. I personally would go to septum first as a subterm under deviation, and then we have septums in our heart, in our nose, and maybe other body areas that I'm not thinking of right now. So we want to go to deviation, septum, and then try to find nasal. Now it's not wrong to find it under nasal septum as subterms, but generally speaking you can try one or the other. I'm just giving you an idea there that septum would be the next one, and then nasal describes septum. The next diagnosis that we have here is inguinal adenopathy. Our main problem or condition is adenopathy, and we can have adenopathy in all the areas of our body where we have nodes or glands. This particular one is located in the inguinal area. So main term adenopathy, and look for the subterm inguinal or a synonym of inguinal, which might be groin. Okay. I'm going to skip down to two more bullets here where it has anterolateral myocardial infarction. So what's our main problem? It's the infarction. Okay, death of a tissue, and that can happen anywhere. Brain, bowels, heart. So our main term is infarction, and then we want to look under myocardial or myocardium, and the anterolateral is the wall of the myocardium. So infarction main term, myocardium, first subterm, and subterm under myocardium is anterolateral. And we'll do one more because the other two on the list here are actually procedures. So we have an intratrochanteric femoral fracture. Take a moment, see if you can identify what the main term is. The main term or condition or problem is fracture. Where is that fracture? It's located in the femur as your first subterm, and then where in the femur? There is the shaft, the upper end, the lower end. This happens to be in the intratrochanteric area of the femur. So fracture main term, femur first subterm, intratrochanteric subterm under femur or femoral. Now, if your medical record had this documentation, intratrochanteric, the code book doesn't, maybe look up a synonym. Look up and see what does intratrochanteric mean. And then if you find some synonyms, maybe you find those synonyms under the word femoral. This ends the recording for main terms.